Hi, I'm Randy Altman with Post Perspective. We're here at NAB 2025, and I'm here with Shane Hurlbut, who is a director of photography, and he has shot films such as Terminator Salvation and Act of Valor, and many, many others. So you're here. You're going to be at two different booths making presentations.
Yes.
Why don't we jump into the camera technology first and then talk about the lighting?
Okay, great.
Is that
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
So camera technology this year is really exciting for me because I've shot all the different camera manufacturers. My last two features, I used Sony Venice 2 mixed with the Caldwell Chameleon. So I did The Perfect Couple for Netflix with Nicole Kidman and Dakota Fanning and Liev Schreiber.
Right.
It's like a limited series. Blew Netflix up. I think first week it had 34.6 million views. It's like a White Lotus, but much more crafted in elegance and richness.
And a lot of it's on a beach, right? It's like it's beautifully shot.
It's right out at the Cape. It took place at Nantucket. We ended up shooting it at Chatham, which is at the kind of where the Cape takes the turn and goes up to P-Town. That's where Chatham is. It's one of the oldest communities there. It was amazing to work with. But the Venice 2 was exactly the camera to use on that because the Venice is something that doesn't really energize color like a red does. Red is a beautiful tool if you're doing very colorful cinema. If you want colors to just organically pop, they do. With the Venice, it's much more how your eye sees life. So the warms are not so warm and the cools are not so cool. And it really kind of fit the family with Nicole Kidman and the whole Winbury legacy and everything.
Yeah.
So coming out of that, I was sent a Blackmagic Ursa Cine 12K to look at, an LF. And, usually with Blackmagic, they've sent me cameras in the past, and most of the time, I have never felt that they were ready for prime time. This one, I did my due diligence like I always do. I fire the camera up. I bring my beautiful daughter in to be my actress. I light her very nicely, and I look at skin. Because the skin tone is everything to, I think, all of cinema, because that is the emotion. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at the face. We're looking for terror, horror, crying, drama. All that comes from the face. So if the skin tones deliver, then I will then go down the rabbit hole of discovery on this camera. Well, I fired it up, and I looked at it, and I go, wow. This is something different from Blackmagic.
So it was that much better than the last Blackmagic camera that you tested?
Huge.
And that's due to the sensor?
Yes. So this is what Blackmagic has done, and this is why I love Grant Petty and his whole team. They are a disruptive tech. I mean, who as a CEO says, all right, I've spent millions of dollars on R&D on a Resolve color correction tool, I'm gonna give it away for free, right? That is disruptive. But he knew the long game because he invested in the artists, which most manufacturers don't. They just have the very expensive price tag of this is their $80,000 camera and you gotta buy it. Where he is like, I'm gonna give you this whole Resolve platform for free, and then as your career expands and you get better, you're gonna want to get the micro panel to color with. And then you're gonna move up to the mini panel. And then you're probably gonna be a colorist at one of these amazing labs. They're investing in you as an artist.
And I think it's his post background that sort of he brings with him to each product that they introduce.
But then, because he has the post, he's building the camera to perform the best with Resolve, right? So now you have a camera that, Red makes their curves, Arri makes their curves, Sony makes their curves of their sensor. Well, Blackmagic makes the curves for the most prominent color correction system on the planet. It's like when you go to Company 3, you're working on Resolve. You're not working on Baselight. You're not working on, any of these other color correction tools. You're working on Resolve. So they have actually created curves in the camera that gives this camera much more range. Even though it's saying it's got 16 stops, I'm finding I'm pushing and ebbing and flowing this camera in all different directions because of the curves that are completely dialed in to Resolve. So it's like a whole other level. Then he designs the sensor. So every sensor on the planet right now, up until this camera, has been RGB, right? With twice as many green pixels as red and blue. And that's your luminance. Well, he goes, I got a very small megapixel camera. I got 12K instead of Aries 4.6K, so their photo buckets are much bigger. I have, because those pixels are so small, I'm going to need to create a sensor that has a white pixel. So it lets more light in to the photocells so you can actually expose. So by creating this, he also got rid of all of the debayering process, because debayering, and it took me a while to understand this, and sorry if I'm going down the tech rabbit hole, but the debayering process basically is one of the most imperfect processes that every camera other than Blackmagic uses. It's shit. And the reason being is it limits all your ability from the camera. Because the camera should be able to, if I want to go at 1 frame per second or 448 frames per second on RAW, I should be able to do it. You can with the Blackmagic because it doesn't use all that computing power to then debayer and demosaic the image. It's using all their power to do that. He doesn't have to do it. So now he can go all these high frame rates at RAW, not at 422 ProRes, not at some, skipping pixels, not zooming in on the sensor. He's still keeping the large format sensor, and he descales in camera as well. So Dave Cole, who's a very trusted colorist from Photochem, I said, let's do a backroom test. Let's take 12K footage and let's put it into DaVinci and see, descale it, so bring it down to 8K, bring it down to 4K, and then compare what the camera does in camera, the descaling, and see if there's a difference. There was none. So it's like now, if I'm shooting a big wide shot for, say I'm doing a world building, right? So I have this beautiful building that looks like the great place that's the modern, vibe of what I'm creating, but there's all buildings in the background. I'm gonna have to take those out of there. Maybe I wanna put a path across a pond. Maybe I wanna put some digital people in there. Oh, there's some Christmas trees in there. I wanna eliminate them. I'm gonna shoot that at 12K. So I'm giving the VFX team all the data possible,
sure,
and that resolution to be able to go in there and really do it well. Then I can shoot my drama at 8K, so I descale with that. So a 12K 50 mil, at 8K it's the same 50 mil, at 4K it's the same 50 mil. So you're the lens language, where usually when you go to 12K and then you descale, then you have to, then it's a different, because you're zooming in on the sensor, so you're cropping. So now the 50 is not a 50, now it's a 32. And that lens language with directors and everything is confusing. You're always sitting there with your calculator going to PCAM and trying to, okay, a 50 mil at 12K, now I'm descaling the 8K, I've zoomed in on the sensor this. It's like all this, mathematics that don't really need to be done anymore. So it's awesome because he's created something that is a reinvention of a sensor technology that every other camera doesn't have. And then he comes out and uses that same sensor to create 17K 65. So now he's competing with the Arri 265 that just launched, that they are not selling. They're only renting. So now Blackmagic at a $30,000 price tag, where it's $250,000 for a 265. You see how Grant is doing exactly what he's done his whole career. He is putting professional tools in the hands of people that would normally never be able to afford them. And now he's investing in them. He's investing because he's had the pocket camera and the wedge and all his different cameras moving up to this point. But now he said, I'm going to invest in these creators. I'm going to invest in these filmmakers now, because I'm going to give them a super professional camera that's going to give them 16 stops of latitude. All the other cameras only had 13 stops. I'm going to put an OLPF in there so you don't have to worry about all the IR pollution that was happening on all their other cameras. I'm going to bring in internal NDs just like all the other professional cameras, so you don't have to worry about double reflection and flare problems. And I'm going to invest in them, that they're now going to have something that gives them the same type of image quality as a Sony, as an Arri, and as a Red. And I'm going to invest in you that you're going to then take that $7,000 camera and now add on to it. And when you get better, you're going to add more pieces and parts, and you're going to invest in yourself.
It is pretty amazing. And you mentioned Dave Cole, colorist, and I want to ask you about the relationship that you have with colorists. So before you start a project, are you in touch? Do you work with on-set Lutz? So how does that all sort of come together early on?
So what I try to do is right off the bat, first find who my colorist is going to be. Because with every studio, they have their specific, post-production teams that they like to go to. And there's always some kind of a bidding war. And you end up settling with, at least whether it's Photochem or Company 3. Those are the two that I usually use. Dave Cole at Photochem, Stefan Sonnefeld at Company 3.
Sure.
Stefan did Terminator Salvation. He did Act of Valor with me. He's done... he did The Babysitter. He did Resident Alien. This is a guy that I go to all the time. I just love his energy. He's an artist, and it's like taking everything that we had done on set, and he's like the icing on the cake. He takes it sometimes in a whole other direction that maybe I didn't see as a cinematographer, and that's what's exciting. That's great collaboration. So I would shoot a test with the possible lenses that I am thinking of for the project, and then I would take that to either Dave Cole or Stefan, and we would look at it. And based on their knowledge, I would then decide which camera and which lens I would go with. Based on that, once we lock that in, now they're creating a show LUT. And that show LUT is actually refined throughout the shoot. It's not anything that is a slam dunk day one, because testing is one thing, but then when you get like on The Perfect Couple, when you walk onto that lavish beach and you're going into that beautiful home and you're seeing your light that you're bringing in, and it's ricocheting all over, and you see the skin tones of Nicole and Dakota and everything. Things kind of metamorphosize, right? They're starting to change and everything. So about the first week, we take the base LUT that Stefan built for me for the Sony Venice 2 and the Caldwell Chameleons, and we started to manicure it based on the location. So we added a little more contrast. We pushed the highlights more so it looked more summery, and those were like little tweaks that we did to it. Now, one thing a lot of people don't realize, and this is something that I'm like super crazy about, is, and I'll tell you a story of why. So when I was on Into the Blue with Jessica Alba and Paul Walker, that was right back when DVD dailies started. So right before that, we would all go into a trailer and we would watch dailies every night on location. If we were in LA, we'd go to a projection room and watch it there, right? So with that, This was DVD dailies, and it was very in its infancy. So with the infancy of that, it was like just kind of a very flat pass. You knew that when you saw it, it was not anything like it was going to be. And, you know, studio execs kind of accepted that. They knew that it was just a pretty much a flat pass of the thing. You know, they knew that once we got into color correction, we would finesse this and make it great. Well, John Stockwell, the director, got really happy with that look, which was awful.
Oh, really?
You know, it was just the worst flat pass possible. The ocean had no deep blues and cyans and everything. The people's skin tones were muted and desaturated. Nothing looked really good. So when I went into the color bay and started to color correct it, he was like, "What are you doing to my movie?" And I'm like, "John, I'm balancing this film out so it looks really good." He goes, "This is not my movie." So it was a big fight to get him to the place where eventually he was like, "Oh my God, this is awesome." But he had sat in that edit bay for 6 months, and that's what he got used to.
It's like when they like the temp music.
Yes, exactly. I love that song. You
That's
can't
right.
have
Yeah,
it.
Exactly. We can't.
That's
going to
cost you.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can't afford that. So now, when I'm doing a test with Stefan, and say I'm using Caldwell chameleons for my my primes, but then I go to a Panavision 10:1 anamorphic zoom, and then if I have macro work, I'm doing that on a Cook macro 90 and 150, and then if I have a drone and I can't fly the Caldwell chameleons and I have to go with lighter lenses, then I have to go with I go with Leica R's on the drone, and then say I have some, you know, action work where it's crash cams or something, and I got to put lenses in there that are not going to be the Caldwell chameleons because I'm going to smash them, right? So all that, I then shoot tests with all those lenses, and then I send those to Stefan, and then he balances the LUT for each one of those lenses. So not the show LUT, he creates CDL. So when we go from the Caldwell chameleons that is baked in on the show LUT, and I switch to the zoom, then we add a CDL that takes the zoom, which tends to be a little warmer, and then he takes that and cools it down, makes it more white like the Caldwell chameleons. That way everything matches. Because then when you get it into the post process, and like this movie with Mick G, he was editing this film, he's seeing very close to what it's going to be in the color bay. And he understands what that is, and he falls in love with that. And then when they go to screenings, like he told me, they didn't even do a color correction pass on the movie when they screened it to the the test audience, because the consistency of me going down the rabbit hole, making sure that every lens had its own CDL, so we matched everything across the board, it fell in almost seamlessly. Now, will I go in there and change some colors and everything on the final grade? Of course. Yeah. But from an overall scope, you know it's early morning when this kid wakes up, and that's not all of a sudden neutral. You know it's high noon when it's neutral, but they maybe, it's like in the past that might have been warm, so he's seeing the timeline of the movie because we are getting it as close as possible.
Before I let you go, because I know you're busy, you were talking about Cook eye technology and how that helps when you get into post.
Yes.
Can you explain to everybody?
Yeah.
How that helps
So
you?
This was a big aha moment for me, specifically where, I made a mistake. It's like as a cinematographer, I was the artist and not the artist and the scientist. So as the artist, I wanted Caldwell chameleons, and I wanted them for all of the third act, which had CGI trees on fire, falling trees, embers, sparks, flare-ups, all this stuff that was not there, that was created by the VFX team.
Right.
So I was like being an artist, and I wanted my Caldwell Chameleon flares, and I wanted my 40 lines of resolution, and everything that made that lens magical. Well, what that did was completely screw me, because I did it all with that without any Cook eye technology. So when I pan the camera, the VFX people don't know that I'm where I panned or how fast I panned, or the distortion when I rack focus to you, and the distortion changes in an anamorphic, and then it's not zooming in, but the distortion, the edges start to bend, and as you rack focus, they then expand out. This is something that cannot be tracked by a VFX artist when you do not have Cook eye technology, right? With eye technology, it tracks your focus, iris, and zoom. So if you zoom in, it's tracking all that. It has accelerators and deaccelerators for motion. So that's phase 2. So when I pan the camera, I tilt up, I go around, anything I'm doing, that is all going to be recorded in metadata. And then it has the distortion and focus. So when I'm focusing and that distortion happens, where say something on the edge of frame that was a box will actually get fatter and then skinnier, this is everything the VFX has to guess on. So my mistake was not going with a smart lens, not forcing myself to get out of my artistic mind and use science to then help VFX track everything that I did. So their budgets would be much lower for because all the metadata is there, so they don't have to spend hours upon hours guessing when I focused, racked, or pulled forward. They don't know how fast that is. There's no metadata to track it, so there's a guessing game. And sometimes it works, or sometimes you have to try 10, 12, 20 hours to get it right. So because I didn't do that, there was a specific flashback effect that I really wanted for all of the Navy SEAL stuff with Chris Pratt. And this effect was a Petzval-Lux effect. So it's an ancient lens that you can actually swirl bokeh on the outer edges. So I thought that would be the greatest kind of flashback for the scenes, to kind of swirl the bokeh and only have what's in center is in focus. So we would rent the lenses. It was going to be very difficult for my focus team, my assistants, to rack focus and everything with that lens, because it's more of a portraiture lens, not an action ship blowing up and doing all that kind of lens. Stuff's not going to be in focus. So I said, okay, if you can deliver this beautiful Petzval-Lux effect that you showed me through VFX, I'll shoot it on Arri Signature Primes and we'll do it in post. Well, because of my mistake in not using eye technology on the Fire, I had to go with an Avid plugin for my flashback, which we've seen many times in other movies. There was nothing really unique about it, but that was my mistake.
At that time, that was your only option, really.
Right. So this is kind of, what I really want to engage cinematographers, director of photographies all over the world, that there's times to be an artist and there's times to be a scientist. And VFX needs to be scientific as much as artistic. And anything that you can do to help them out, to lower their costs, lower their time deliverables, is only going to benefit you as a cinematographer. And the audience is never going to know that you shot with a Caldwell and then went over to a Cook S8i, right? They're never going to know.
Yeah.
I'm going to know because and maybe some cinephiles that are really down deep, but if the story's there and the emotion there and you're on the ride, you're not noticing that. But what you are noticing is the budgets ballooning because director photographies are not using the technology. You're sacrificing what you could have had because you didn't do your due diligence and your research. And that's kind of what I want to, it's like you have to do the work as a director of photography. And that means putting on the scientific hat as much as the artistic hat.
100%. Shane, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
I could chat with you forever, but I'm sure you have other things that you need to be doing. So thanks for coming and making the trek to the very end of the South Hall.
Yes, you're so welcome. Thank you.